The first thing I remember is the floor. I could feel it spreading slowly under my temple. My ribs screamed with every shallow breath. Cold hardwood pressed against my cheek, the grain of it sharp and familiar. The boards that I chose myself, that I paid for myself, and that my husband Robert laid in this house 23 years ago, when this was still a home full of birthday cakes and crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator. Now it held my blood. The room tilted when I tried to lift my head, and I heard Riva's voice cut through the ringing. "Stay down, Mom. You're embarrassing yourself." Or, "Go ahead, call them. Who are they going to believe?" So there I was, lying on the floor of my own living room, my daughter standing over me, my son-in-law, William, 2 steps behind her with a pen in his hand and a folder of documents on my coffee table. The same documents I had refused to sign 3 times in the last 2 months. She wanted me to reach for my phone. So I did. It's just that I didn't enter the numbers she was expecting. And in that moment, lying there in my own blood, I almost smiled. Because what Riva didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I had been ready for this night for a very long time. Stay with me. What I did before that door even opened is the reason this story ends the way it does. Before we get down to business, give this a like and tell me, have you ever been in a situation where your own children tried to take everything away from you? Or maybe that's exactly what happened to you. My name is Madison Adams. I am 61 years old, and I spent 30 of those years building something real. A house, a retirement account, a small rental property on the east side of town. Nothing extravagant, just the kind of stability that comes from working double shifts and skipping vacations and making choices that hurt in the short run so they wouldn't hurt forever. Riva grew up watching me build it. I thought that meant she understood what it cost. I was wrong. It started about 8 months ago, not with a fight. It never starts with a fight. It started with concern. That careful, practiced concern that sounds like love until you listen closely enough to hear what's underneath it. Riva began calling more often, coming by on Sundays, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea she'd made herself, and asking questions that felt like inventory. How's the rental doing? Is the mortgage fully paid? Have you looked at your retirement accounts lately? What does your will say now that Dad's gone? I answered at first. I thought she was worried. I was her mother. I wanted to believe the best. Then her husband William started coming to see me with Riva. William is not a subtle man. Where Riva dressed ambition as concern, William put greed on the table bare-handed. He sat across from me one afternoon and told me with a straight face that I was sitting on underutilized assets, that the rental property was generating below-market returns, that if the house were leveraged properly, it could become the foundation of a real financial strategy. I asked him, whose strategy? He smiled. Ours, as a family. I excused myself to refill my coffee and stood at the kitchen sink for a long moment, looking out at the backyard I had mowed every summer for 2 decades, and I thought, this is not concern, this is reconnaissance. The next visit, Riva brought documents, power of attorney, a trust restructuring that would have transferred management of all my assets to her and William immediately. Not upon my death, not upon my incapacitation, now, immediately. She sat across from me and explained it in the same gentle voice she used when she thought I needed things explained slowly. And she said, "It's just protection, Mom, in case something happens." I looked at the documents, I looked at her face, and I understood with cold, absolute clarity that my daughter had looked at everything I had spent my life building and decided it should belong to her. I didn't sign. And the moment I said no, the warmth disappeared. Not gradually, instantly, like a light switching off. The visits got shorter, the questions got sharper. Riva stopped pretending to ask about my health. William stopped caring about my comfort. They were no longer trying to convince me. They were measuring my resistance, calculating how long it would take to wear me down. That was when I started thinking like a mother trying to keep the peace, and started thinking like a woman under siege. Here's what I want you to understand. I did not call a friend. I did not write in a journal. I did not cry into my coffee hoping things would get better. I called an attorney. His name was Miles Holden, a man I had been referred to by a colleague at the nonprofit where I volunteer. Quiet, methodical, the kind of lawyer who listens more than he speaks and takes more notes than you expect. I sat in his office on a Tuesday afternoon and told him everything. Every question Riva had asked, every document William had slid across my table, every visit that had felt less like family and more like a closing argument. Miles didn't tell me I was overreacting. He told me to start documenting. So I did. I kept records of every conversation, saved every text message. I took photographs of the documents they had brought. I met with Miles 3 more times over the following weeks, and together we quietly restructured everything they thought they could reach. Updated my will, revised beneficiary designations, moved accounts, tightened legal protections on the rental property, built a wall, brick by invisible brick, around everything I had spent my life constructing. And then I installed cameras. Every room, front door, back door, living room, kitchen, hallway. High resolution, cloud-backed, triggered by motion and recording continuously. I told no one. I put them in places that looked like ordinary objects: a smoke detector in the hallway, a small device on the bookshelf, a sensor above the front door. I also gave Miles a number, not 911, my number. And I told him, if I call you from home and say the word threat, danger, come immediately. Don't ask questions, just come and bring whoever needs to come with you. He didn't hesitate.
And then I waited. Not with fear, with something steadier than fear. I had done everything I could do. I had prepared. Whatever they tried to force, I was already ahead of it. They came on a Thursday evening. Riva called first, said she just wanted to talk, that she had brought a new version of the documents, that this one was simpler, that it would take 5 minutes. She sounded reasonable, patient, the voice she used when she still thought patience would work. I let them in. William set the folder on my coffee table like he'd done it 100 times. Riva sat down and crossed her legs and looked at me with the expression of someone who had already decided how the conversation would end, and she slid the papers across the table and held out the pen. I looked at the pen. I looked at my daughter. I said, "No." The room changed. William stood up. His voice dropped, not shouting, colder than shouting. He said something about how I was being foolish, how I was making things harder than they needed to be, how there were ways to handle this if I wouldn't cooperate. And then he moved toward me, and Riva didn't stop him, and he shoved me hard, and I went backward over the arm of the chair and hit the floor. I heard my own cry more than I felt it. Then I felt it. My ribs, my shoulder, the side of my head against the corner of the bookshelf. Riva stood over me. Her voice was completely flat. "Sign the papers, Mom. This is getting ridiculous." I lay on my floor. I breathed through the pain, and I reached for my phone. Riva said, "Go ahead and call them. They're going to think you're confused. Elderly woman, living alone, probably fell." She actually shrugged. Who were they going to believe? I pressed one button, one number. Miles. He picked up on the second ring. I said, "Miles, threat, danger." A pause. Then, steady and calm, "I'm on my way. Don't move." I lowered the phone. Riva looked at me with something between contempt and curiosity. Who was that? I didn't answer. I just looked at the bookshelf, at the small device sitting between two books on the second shelf, its tiny lens catching the light from the overhead fixture. I looked right into it. They came in 11 minutes. Miles first, then 2 officers behind him, and a third who had apparently been 2 blocks away when dispatch received the call Miles had already made from his car before he even left his office. The door opened and the room changed in an instant. Not loudly, there was no dramatic entrance, just the sudden presence of people who had no reason to doubt what they were walking into, because Miles had already told them exactly what to expect, and the cameras had already recorded exactly what had happened. William stepped back. Riva's composure shattered the moment she saw Miles. She knew who he was. She had done enough research on me to know that I had retained him, and seeing him walk through my door, calm, prepared, carrying a folder of his own, told her something had gone very wrong with their plan. Mrs. Adams contacted my office 8 weeks ago, Miles said, not to me, but to the officers, in the clear, measured voice he used in courtrooms. She provided documentation of an ongoing financial coercion pattern and authorized me to preserve legal records. She also installed surveillance equipment throughout this property. Everything that occurred tonight has been recorded. William said, "That's not..." One of the officers held up a hand. That was enough. I was helped to the couch. A paramedic arrived 4 minutes later. My ribs were bruised, not broken. It would take me 2 weeks to be able to laugh without wincing. My head required 3 stitches at the urgent care center Miles drove me to himself after the police had finished. But I sat on that couch, and I watched Riva's face as the officers explained what was happening, and what I saw wasn't the face of my daughter. It was the face of someone whose plan had collapsed, every exit closed, every story contradicted, every move already documented before she had made it. She looked at me once across the room. I held her gaze. I did not look away. Riva and William were arrested that night. The assault charges were the beginning. Miles and I spent the weeks that followed working with the prosecutor's office, providing the full record of documented coercion, the messages, the records of every document they'd produced, the security footage from months of visits that showed a pattern no one could explain away as a misunderstanding. William hired a lawyer who advised him to take a plea. Riva hired a different one who told her the same thing. There was a call from the jail. I saw the number on my screen, and I sat with it for a moment. I did not answer. Not out of cruelty. I want you to understand that. I have thought about my daughter every single day since that night. I have thought about the girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder watching movies, the teenager I drove to volleyball practice at 6 in the morning, the woman I helped move into her first apartment. I have thought about her constantly. But I also understand something now that I didn't want to understand before. Love is not the same as surrender. Family is not a reason to hand someone the key to everything you built, and refusing to be destroyed by the people who should have protected you is not a betrayal of love. It is the most honest form of self-respect there is. Riva didn't see a mother when she looked at me. She saw an obstacle, a locked door between her and what she had decided should already be hers. And whatever grief I carry about that, whatever sadness lives in me about the version of my daughter I thought I knew, it does not change what she chose to do. Greed doesn't create who people are. It reveals it. My house is quiet now. I repainted the living room. It took me longer than it should have. My shoulder still aches when I hold my arm above my head for too long. But I chose the color myself, a warm, deep terracotta, and I did the work myself, slowly over 3 weekends with the windows open and music playing. The cameras are still up. I don't think I'll take them down. Not because I live in fear, I don't. I sleep well now in a way I hadn't for months while I was waiting, while I was watching, while I was preparing for a night I hoped would never come. I sleep well because I know what I did when it mattered. I did not freeze. I did not beg. I did not bargain with people who were not bargaining in good faith. I had spent months quietly, methodically, building a wall while they assumed I was standing still. And when they finally pushed, I was already on the other side of it. That is not luck. That is not resilience in some vague, inspirational sense. It is preparation. It is the choice to take your own safety seriously, even when the people threatening it are the last people you ever expected. It is the understanding that the most dangerous betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people who know exactly where to push. I am 61 years old. I live alone. I mow my own yard in the summer, and I keep my finances in careful order, and I meet with Miles twice a year now just to stay ahead of things, just to keep the walls where they need to be. And every morning, I make coffee, and I stand at the kitchen window, and I look out at the yard, my house, my life. And I think, I built this, I protected this, and no one is ever going to take it from me. Not while I still have one number left to call.
Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.